Welcome to Sermon Q&A. Pastor Michael here with you. I am in the studio with Pastor Craig and Pastor Alex. And on January 9th, 2022, we did a sermon series. We launched it called Jesus in an Insidious World. And Pastor Alex, you get the first question. Is it okay to have doubts about my faith?
Okay, so I think if somebody's going to click on this question, they're going to come at it from one of two angles. One of those angles is it a good thing for me to doubt? The other of those angles is like, am I safe to bring my doubts to God? Right? So let's be clear. Scripture never views doubt as like a good or noble thing. However, whenever we see, people doubting in Scripture, because you can look character after character, person after person in Scripture, and all of them struggle with doubt to some degree. And God, time and time again, shows himself to be safe to doubt around, although he's always seeking to bring those people further along in faith. His goal is always faith. Right. So let's deal with this idea of, is doubt a good thing? The word doubt actually means double-minded. Like to think one thing, but then realize that you're actually like heading in a different direction from what you're thinking. So messages that we get from leaders today, and this happens a lot in evangelicalism, people, pastors speaking, and they're trying to like empathize and give comfort, but they say things like, God is bigger than your doubt. God can handle your doubts. Let God know about your doubts and tell God all about your doubts. In fact, like sometimes you'll even hear people say, doubt is healthy, right? Or it's good to have like a healthy sense of doubt. All of this is really common, and there are kernels of truth in there, right? But they can give this sense that
doubt is admirable.
Right. Doubt's an admirable thing. Right. And so if I'm Satan, right, and I want to kind of create confusion in the church and amongst Christians, like what better thing to do than to convince people like, yeah, doubt is a noble thing to have. Like it's good to kind of not be clear about things. So
it's interesting as you say that, because literally, let's take each of those statements. God is bigger than your doubt. True.
Yes.
God can handle your doubt. True.
Yes.
But the net effect is that people rarely are encouraged to move out of their doubt, to resolve their doubt. I think that's very striking. And when I interface with a lot of pastors, particularly if they're working with younger people, doubt is a normal, real thing. It is normal. I wouldn't call it healthy, but that's the interesting part. It's almost this need to not challenge somebody and to not push them forward. And almost to say, like, if this is where you're at, like, I'm not allowed to even challenge that. All I can do is affirm and acknowledge, but I can't say to you, this isn't a content, good place to be. It's okay. It is normal, but it's not healthy. And so we need to figure out, how do we move you closer to faith? And that might take years, but I want to affirm you, because I see this all the time.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of spiritual leaders are afraid to upset people. So they play the safe route, which is normalizing and then calling it healthy.
Well, and then also like you have fundamentalist backgrounds too, where it's not safe to ask questions. It's not safe to bring that stuff up, right? And so that you have the kind of these competing worlds working against each other. So James 1:6 makes it clear. The one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind, right? Like doubt at the end of the day does not lead you to a good place. It's something you want to get out of. So I think of like Peter. Peter was on the water, like the storm is going crazy, and he gets like up the courage, like, Jesus, call me to come to you. I'm going to come to you out in the water. And so Peter walks out, but then all of a sudden he sees the waves and he gets scared and he starts to sink. And Jesus reaches down and saves him, and then says, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Right. So he's looking at the doubt and going, this is not good. Like, we need to resolve this. We need to move past this.
Can I ask you a question, Alex, on that? Why do you think Jesus said, "Oh, you of little faith"? And it seems like he's harder on Peter than he is on the guys on the boat that didn't even attempt to walk out.
Right. Because Peter attempted to walk out.
He said, I can do it if you call me out there.
Well, I mean, it just points to the fact that like his goal is ultimately like the next step of faith, the deeper faith, the further faith. And any moment where that faith starts to dissipate, he wants to move us to a stronger faith.
It also shows Peter where doubt comes from. And doubt comes from when you get your eyes off of what you know to be true about God, and you see the waves and the threat and the what ifs and all that kind of stuff. Like that's wow. I really appreciate something you said, which is there's two things pulling at this, which number one is this movement to, as we answered earlier, to deconstruct, to be in a doubting place, to not know truth, to not have clarity, to live in confusion. But then fundamentalism, which says you may never ask questions, do not challenge, and so like if I'm a young person, I'm stuck between the cultural pull, some of the fundamentalism that exists in evangelicalism, and at the end of the day, it's like, well, here I am, and I do have doubts, and I don't need to be told it's noble, but I also don't need to be told you're not allowed to ask questions about it. I need to get answers, and I need to move forward, and that's hard. That's a hard place to be for a lot of young people, especially.
Yeah, and so you asked the question, then can I safely bring my doubts to God? Well, what happened to Peter when he doubted? Jesus first reached down into the water and pulled him up and saved him from the water, right?
He didn't throw him back overboard.
Right. Or he didn't just let him sink, right?
Could you imagine if Peter was like, well, why am I am I okay to down? Drown.
Right.
Exactly. Get out of here.
Right. So I want to tell you, you don't have to have all the pieces figured out or put together before you start following Jesus. Whatever piece of faith you have, go with that. And absolutely, God can handle your doubt.
100%.
But he handles your doubt because he's gracious and forgiving.
Yeah. And he handles your doubt by offering you a faith that overcomes your doubt.
Right.
I think about Paul praying those 3 times that thing in his side, that thorn in his flesh, would be taken away. And God tells him each time, no. Well, he doesn't get a verbal no from God. It just doesn't get healed. Yeah. So he's thinking to himself, well, why do I still have this thing? And ultimately, Paul says, okay, I understand. God is not going... This thing doesn't draw Paul into a dungeon of doubt. Right. Instead, it draws him into faith because he finishes by saying, God has given me this weakness so that he can be greater through me.
My grace is sufficient for you, right? So can I safely be open about my doubt and bring it to God? Yes, but God's goal is always that we would move to a greater faith.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. And Alex and Craig and I will be back. We've got plenty more questions. We'll see you next time on Q&A.